hard to believe, I know, but sometimes it seems that people go out of their way to be rude to politicians. And sometimes, not often enough as far as I'm concerned, politicians are rude right back. Graham Jones MP recently received an email from a man who told him that by voting for military action in Syria, he would have the blood of tens of thousands of innocents on his hands. And with refreshing northern directness, Graham replied, "You're talking bollocks."
Under policy of truth.
I once had to physically remove a constituent from my advice surgery because he had been particularly abusive. And I told him that he would not expect to receive any help or representation from me in future. Unfortunately, and to my lasting regret, I never actually told him what I really thought of him. In a country where honesty and transparency and the right to protest, like this one behind me, are valued above all others, it's significant, nay depressing, that our elected representatives must avoid telling the truth to their constituents, especially when that truth is what they actually think of them.
To faithfully pursue the policy of truth.
MPs have to take it, not dish it out. Or so we're told. It's their job to sit and listen and do as they are told by the people who, after all, pay their very generous salaries, right? Wrong. If you want to tell your MP that he's murdering babies in Syria, go ahead. But don't be offended if in return he tells you that you're an appeaser of murdering, fascist, rapist, torturing scum. Oh, and thanks so much for taking the time to write. It's time for politicians to fight back. It's time for them to get rude.
And Tom Harris joins us now. Don't hold back in this interview, Tom. Tell us what you really think. Is this as a result of pent-up anger that you have wanted to unleash on those constituents while you were an MP?
It's probably pent-up anger, but it was pent-up anger I did actually release when I was an MP occasionally. But
did it do you any good?
Didn't do me any harm. You know, I mean, I remember the occasion that I referred to when I had to physically throw someone at my surgery. I was re-elected twice on bigger majorities after that.
Right.
But
you weren't in a marginal seat.
No, I think the vast experience that I have and that other colleagues have is that people are generally respectful and nice.
Right, are they? So the majority are. You're talking about a few people here.
There are some times where you get outright abuse, but there's a low-level passive aggression that you sometimes have to deal with when you're out with your family and people feel they have the right to come up to you and just be a little bit jaggy and a little bit undermining you in front of your family and your kids, and I just think that's completely unacceptable. You'd never accept that in any other role of life.
Right, wouldn't you? I mean, are you being thin-skinned on issues that you know? I mean, 'twas ever thus. People get very upset about issues of war and peace, and on economy, on benefits, or whatever it is. People get very emotional. Isn't that your job to sort of soak that up a little bit?
No, it's not.
Right.
I think MPs have got as much right to be held with respect, not deference, but respect, in the same way that a GP or a head teacher should expect respect. And I think if people are rude to you, I think it's perfectly acceptable to offer the same level of rudeness back.
And do you do that, Alan? I mean, if a constituent is rude to you in that sort of way, would you fire back?
Yeah, you either sort of humour it and just sort of brush them off. But if someone is consistently rude, yes. And what I find has really changed over the last few years, setting aside the deep vulgarity of social media, is actually the email has made people fire things off, often in the dead of night, don't put their address necessarily, and they're just very aggressive in their language. Now, I quite often go back and say, I refuse to correspond with you until you're prepared to be polite and considerate in the tone you adopt. And I've had to do that more and more over the last 4 or 5 years.
Do you think things changed? I mean, it's a bit unfair because, Lisa, you're a relatively new MP after expenses. Do you think people have become ruder constituents since then?
Yeah. I think a bit, but I think Alan's right. I think social media often means that people correspond in ways they wouldn't. I also think sometimes people shout at you because they're frustrated. And like Tom compared it to the GP or the head teacher, and I think GPs and head teachers probably get that as well. And you learn to work out when people are actually just really, really frustrated and how to handle that and to help them climb down.
Have you ever been frightened in surgeries? I mean, you're a big chap, Tom, so
I'm not.
you can release. You said it, Alan. But but would you ever be scared and intimidated? I mean,
I did have one constituent who came to see me in a rage, demanding that I intervene because he'd been turned down for a gun licence because of an anger management problem. And I wasn't so much frightened as very clear.
What did you say?
And very concise.
I see. Well, Tom Harris, thank you very much.
Right, before we...